All right, one of the first things that you look at in the transformations unit in Pre-Calculus 12 is looking at what happens when you take a function, any old function. The one I'm going to use specifically is absolute value of x, which you'd write on paper as this with those lines, but on the calculator write it like that. Could be any function though, right? We're looking specifically at what happens if you take y equals f of x, some function, and make some changes to it. So one change we're looking at making is we're looking at replacing the x. Where can I write it? I can write it right over here. We're going to look at replacing the x with x plus some number, h I'll put. Right? So for instance, let's say we're replacing x with x plus 3 or x with x minus 4. What do you get with this function here? Well, that function, you just write it as absolute value of x plus 3, or y equals absolute value of x minus 4. Right? If you're writing it with the brackets or with those straight line absolute value brackets, x plus 3, y equals absolute value of x minus 4. Oops. Or just if you're talking about a function in general, y equals f of x plus 3, or y equals f of x minus 4, something like that, right? Making a change inside there. It's a change inside before you apply the function. This change here, you're replacing x with x plus 3, x minus 4, something like that. Or you're replacing in the other functions as well, right? We'll highlight it every single time here just to make it clear. So we want to know what happens to the graph when you do that, right? When you make that change. So we are going to go to a graph here. We'll put in our function here, y equals absolute value of x to start with. All right, and then we're going to put in a new expression, new function here, y equals absolute value of x. Let's do what I did first there, plus 3. Let's make that a different color so we can see the difference, right? The one that's black is the second one. When you put a plus 3 in the function, inside, before you apply it, okay? That's what we're looking at here. We're changing that x to that x plus 3. Replacing x with x plus 3. It ends up shifting the function 3 to the left. Okay, now that might be the opposite of what you think because you have an x plus 3. You might wonder, why is it going the negative direction when I put x plus 3? And just to check it out the other way as well, let's say, what if you do minus? It's over there. I guess I had x minus 4 before, but any number you subtract there, it's going to be off to the right. X minus 4, replacing x with x minus 4, shifts it in a positive direction. Kind of goes the opposite. All right. Well, let's see what's happening in a table because we want to look at it a bunch of different ways. So this is the first one here, x absolute value of x. So this first table, we're going to look at what happens as x absolute value of x, some of the points, right? And this is x and absolute value of x plus 3. What we're going to track here now is what happens to any given point here. So let's change this back to the one we had, x plus 3. Say this point right here, it's gone to there. This point right here, it's shifted to there. Every single one has been shifted by 3. Okay, all those have been shifted. This one's been shifted. Every single point's been shifted over 3. Right? If we grab a screenshot of this here, we can draw on it a little bit, make that a little more clear. Let's get a screenshot of this. And we'll scribble on it a bit. Alright, so say at that point, it's not just the vertex of this particular function, it moves every single point. All the points have moved over by that much. Alright? 3 units to the left. Every single point here. I'm not going to draw them all, but pick any point. There's a corresponding point that it gets mapped to on the new function. All right. if we look at it in a table, you can see what's happening here. Because again, it seems like it's going the opposite direction. If I say, let's put in -5 here, this should turn out to be absolute value is +5, right? This one over here, if I want to maintain that +5 as a y value, because I want to compare where the y values are the same. If I want to maintain that same y value, if over here, if I'm going to add 3 to the x value, I'm adding 3 to the x value. If I'm going to do that, instead of starting with -5 and taking its absolute value and getting 5, I have to start with something 3 smaller, 3 less than that original x value. I got to start with -8 instead of -5. If the first thing I'm going to do is add 3, I got to start 3 units smaller at -8. Because then think about it, if you substitute that -8 in there, you add 3, you get -5, absolute value is 5. All right? Any x value I put in here, okay, the one that's corresponding, the point that corresponds over here to -3, 3 is -6, 3, because you got to start with something 3 units smaller if the first thing you do is add, right? It's got to be a balance there. Continue it down here. We can just do it the quick and easy way here, okay? All right, whoops, missed the last one, but that's okay. Every single point here, 0, 0, goes to -3, 0. 2, 2 goes to -1, 2. Only difference is that x value is 3 lower. All right? So that's called a, if we want some terminology here, when you replace x with x plus h. Okay? H is any real number. If you replace x with x plus h, if h is positive, or in other words, another way to say that is h is greater than 0, it gets translated in the opposite way you think. If you have a positive number, like x plus 3, it gets translated left by that many units. If h is negative, okay, or in other words, h is less than 0, the other way to say it there, it gets translated to the right. Okay, again, it goes the opposite of what you think. Now, somebody might trick you sometimes, because often you see them write it not as y equals f of just some function. F can stand for any function. Instead of writing f of x plus h, they might trick you and write f of x minus h. If there's a minus in there, well, you have to realize that these two things are going to switch around here, right? Because if you got a minus in there, that's going to have to come over here. This is going to have to go over there, right? If you have a minus in there, because minus, right? Like if it's really x plus 3, it's the same as x minus -3. Right? So that's a bit tricky. Just watch carefully and think about specific numbers when you're trying to decide what happens. All right? That's horizontal translations.